I'm here with Carol. She's at a company that just went all remote, closed their last office, and we're going to discuss remote work practices. Take it away, Carol.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sid. Yeah, it's an interesting time for the company where, as you said, we closed our last office and are working through how you operate as an all remote company. So curious from your perspective, how have you seen the remote practices evolve over the last number of years?
Um, over the last few years, I think a lot of companies went back to the office. Basically, a lot of companies couldn't do it. So I think I went through when all the companies went remote, we were like, oh, we thought you had to do all these practices to do remote effectively. And then all these other companies are suddenly able to do remote and do it effectively.
Mm,
And we were like a little bit surprised. But after a couple of years, they all said, okay, well, it works, but we're missing some. It works in the short term for us, but we're missing things in the long term. They had trouble articulating what they missed. Felt
mm.
like they missed trust between people. But they went back to the office. So apparently it's not easy, and you got to adjust some things in your company.
Mm. Yeah, it has to be very intentional how you go about it. So when you think about that, like what would you consider to be the key pillars to operate effectively as a remote company then?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that come to mind. Kind of focusing on output over input. So be very deliberate on kind of evaluating performance by output, not input.
Mm.
And that's easy to say, but it's hard to do. It's very tempting to
Yeah.
say, oh, and that person's on holiday a lot, so maybe they don't get as much done. And that's it's really important. You keep focusing on what did they get done.
Mm.
Um, I think it really helps if the whole company is remote. You've seen these hybrid remote where there's still a headquarter. That tends to be very hard. I wrote down written culture, but kind of remote companies tend to be good in creating artifacts. That
Mm.
can be a written piece, like a Google Doc, but it can also be a recorded video or something like that. They're good in creating these async
Mm.
artifacts, um, anywhere from a handbook to a YouTube channel. And they tend to be good at facilitating informal communication, kind of making it easy to get to know other people within the company,
Mm.
um, in an informal way, even though you're remote. I think that's to do remote. I think to do multi time zones well, that's a whole other ball game. Then you
Mm.
have to be really good at asynchronous communication. It's great if you can avoid that. If you get kind of a time
Mm.
zone concentration where nearly all people are in the same time zone, you don't have to deal with that. You can just do remote, but you don't have to do asynchronous as much.
Mm. Mm. Got it. Okay. And when you think of GitLab back when it was around 500 people, and you had a head of remote role within the company, would you what importance did that play in the success of GitLab being remote, doing remote well? And would you hire it again if you were back at that stage?
For GitLab, that was very much a marketing role where it was the evangelist of our work practices to the outside world.
Mm-hmm.
That would work great. Like, I'd certainly do that again. They were also kind of the person to kind of sometimes identify something that wasn't working and make a suggestion to fix it. But that was a much smaller part of the role. And I think that could just be done by a people department. That can be done by people, business partners, leadership, management team. Like, everyone's responsible for making the company work well. Since it's an all remote company, like, remote practices are just the company's
Yeah,
practices. So I wouldn't make that a separate function, kind of separate from everything else.
got it. Thank you.
Thanks so much for the conversation, Carol.
Yeah, thanks, Ed.